I'm Adam.
And I'm Cleo.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Hey Cleo, have you ever owned a pet?
The cutest puppy in the world, Truck.
Did you say Truck? What kind of name is that for a dog?
It's kind of a long story, but it came from my brother mumbling too much when he talks. So everybody thought he said Truck instead of Chuck.
Oh. In today's book, two men own a few chickens, but it quickly grows to be too many. Let's get started. Mr. Watson's Chickens, written by Jarrett Dapier, illustrated by Andrea Tsurumi. Mr. Watson lived with Mr. Nelson in a big honking house with a teeny tiny yard in a big honking city. And in that teeny tiny yard, they kept 2 dogs, 3 cats, and a handful of chickens. Mr. Watson loved his chickens, and his chickens loved him. He started, like any sensible person, with 3. And every morning, he and Mr. Nelson would count them. But soon, Mr. Watson's chicken collection grew. And grew. And grew. Before they knew it, Mr. Watson had 456 chickens. Their house was teeming with birds. Chickens in the sink, chickens on the bed, chickens in the bread box, chickens on their heads. There were even chickens in the bathtub. And the noise, the house shook with it. Aunt Agnes made up her own song. Shooby-doo, wonky-pow, bwaka-bwaka, into chow-chow. And she sang it all the time. Still, Mr. Nelson loved to cook eggs for Mr. Watson, so he was happy with this arrangement.
That is horrible.
The song that the chicken is always singing? I don't think it's that bad.
No, the 2 men are eating the eggs. Isn't that a little messed up to do in front of all of those chickens?
Now that you mention it, it isn't very considerate. Until he found 4 chickens in his brand new boots. Mr. Watson, these chickens are becoming a problem, cried Mr. Nelson. You're right, Mr. Watson said, and he sat down to think of what to do. The next day, Mr. Nelson found feathers in his hair gel. Mr. Watson, cried Mr. Nelson, these chickens are a problem. You're right, Mr. Watson said, and he sat down to think of what to do. Late that night, Aunt Agnes led the other chickens in a full choral rendition of her favorite song. Shoo-doo, wonky-pow, bwaka-bwaka, into chow-chow. It was too much. Mr. Watson, Mr. Nelson cried, these chickens are more than a problem. If you don't get rid of them, I'm moving to the coop out back, alone. Mr. Watson loved his chickens, but he loved Mr. Nelson more. Without Mr. Nelson, his heart would be a broken egg.
That's what I'm saying. Kick this guy to the curb. He doesn't seem like he's thinking about other people's feelings.
Sometimes people get so caught up in what they're doing, they don't think about how it may impact others. I bet he'll make it right.
Why do you say that?
Because that's what you do for love. So the next day, the 2 men gathered up the chickens in cages, boxes, and crates. They loaded them onto wagons all tied together in a line and set off for the county fair to find the chicks a loving home. But just as they reached their destination, Mr. Watson tripped. All the chickens were gone. No, Mr. Watson wailed. How will we ever find them all? Now the whole city would be littered with chickens. Sure enough, whose chickens are these? The pickle slinger cried. 10 chickens bobbed in her tubs. That'll be me, said Mr. Watson with a 1, 2, 3 as he moseyed over to collect up his chickens. Whose chickens are these? The cheesemonger cried. 20 chickens were feather deep in their cheese. "That'll be me," said Mr. Watson, with a 1, 2, 3 as he slided over to collect up his chickens.
Whose chickens are these?
The nut hawker howled. 30 chickens waited in his bins. "That'll be me," whispered Mr. Watson with a 1, 2, 3 as he skulked over to collect up his chickens. At long last, Mr. Watson and Mr. Nelson collected every single chicken, all except one. Where was that final chicken?
Did you find her?
Nope, I'm disappointed. I used to be so good at finding Waldo. Did you find her?
That's a secret.
So, that's a no.
That's a go back and pause until you find her.
Or just go to the next page.
Or do that.
Shooby-doo, wonky pow, ba-waka waka, in the chow chow.
The other chickens joined Aunt Agnes.
Shooby-doo, wonky pow, ba-waka waka, in the chow chow.
The crowd went wild. They'd never heard such a beautiful song. Just then, an official-looking lady bellowed, "Quiet! Those chicks still up for adoption, bub?" she asked. "I'll take 'em all." "All?" gasped Mr. Watson. "All. I've been looking for a new act for the fair. A big honkin' chicken choir is just what I need." "Done," cried Mr. Watson. That night, Mr. Watson and Mr. Nelson ate supper, and there were no chickens in their soup. They brushed their teeth, and there were no chickens in the sink. They got ready for bed, and there were no chickens in their pajamas. But Mr. Watson felt sad without his chickens, and Mr. Nelson did too. Now their house was an empty nest. Or was it? Shooby-doo, wonky pow, bwaka bwaka and the chow chow. It begins again. 1, 2, 3. And so it begins again.
I bet that Mr. Watson's going to take Mr. Nelson's feelings into consideration this time.
I bet so too. You know what I would consider?
What's that?
Liking this video and subscribing to the channel?
You would?
I'm Adam.
And I'm Cupcake.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Did you know chickens don't sweat? They also don't bathe themselves with water. Instead, they fluff their feathers with dirt. This scrubs dead skin cells and eliminates oil buildup. These dirt baths actually help keep their feathers clean. Not only that, if there's no dirt around, chickens will still go through the motions of taking a dust bath.